everyone. My name is Penelope. I'm with the Penny Tribune, and this is the Penny Pointed podcast, where we invite community members, politicians, and prominent figures to talk about the accountability of politicians. So today I have Jim Keady with me. Jim is known for the 1999 investigative journalism of the Nike sweatshops. He also has run for representative and other positions. He served as city council in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and oversaw the housing aspects of Asbury. He is part of Resist Fascism and recently has done activism events in New York in front of Trump Tower. And if you remember, famously during Hurricane Sandy and the recovery efforts, the vile attacks of Chris Christie on people, and the comments where Chris Christie said, "Sit down and shut up." He was speaking to Jim Keady, and so we have Jim Keady here today. And Jim, I just wanted to let you kind of introduce yourself, say what you're doing, and plug any information you want to plug. And then today we'll talk about Cory Booker, the inaction around ICE and Gaza, his ties to pharmaceutical companies, and his time as mayor in Newark, his constituents that are just overall unhappy, and the tone deafness of his post and book tour right now. So go ahead, Jim.
Well, hi, Penelope. Thank you for having me. And I want to say thank you for doing the work that you do. This kind of grassroots journalism and engagement is so important, especially in these times in which we find ourselves. And here in the great state of New Jersey, where we are looking for leadership from our senior senator in Cory Booker, and we're not quite getting it right now, it is imperative that we hold his feet to the fire, expose where he is falling short, and just demand accountability and better representation for the person that holds one of the three highest positions representing the people of our state. In terms of the background that you brought up, you hit a lot of bases. I got involved, I would say I got radicalized in terms of my activism when I was a grad student at St. John's University back in the late 90s. I was also, while I was coaching soccer at St. John's University with the men's soccer program. At the time, we were the defending national champions, best team in the country. While I was coaching, I was doing a grad degree in theology. One of my first courses, I started writing a paper about the Nike Corporation and their labor practices in light of what's called Catholic social teaching. And what I found was if you wanted to pick a company that violated everything we claimed to stand for, Nike was it. And at the same time, the university was negotiating a $3.5 million endorsement deal with Nike. Part of that deal, I would have to wear and promote the products. I took a stand. I said I couldn't be a walking advertisement for a company that was exploiting mostly poor women of color in developing countries around the world. And I was given an ultimatum: you wear Nike, you drop this, or get out. And I held my ground. I was forced to resign. I became, and I still am, the only athlete in the world to say no to taking part in a Nike endorsement contract because of their sweatshop abuses. And that got a lot of press at the time. And I was in front of audiences, invited to college campuses to talk about it. And I had market fundamentalists telling me, you know what you're talking about? Those are great jobs for those poor people. And what else would they do if they weren't working for Nike? I knew from my research they were wrong. The competitive athlete in me wanted to prove them wrong. So in the summer of 2000, I moved to Indonesia, and I went and lived in a Nike factory workers village in a slum outside of the capital of Jakarta, and tried to survive on their wages for 1 month. It was $1.25 a day. And I lost 25 pounds that month, living like a Nike sweatshop worker. And I met the mostly young women who make the clothes and the shoes that I wore as an athlete and we all wear as consumers. And I promised them, I will go home, I will advocate for you, I'll tell your stories. And I thought I was going to do that work for, do like a 6 or 7 week speaking tour. I did it full time for almost 15 years until on May Day, on Labor Day, International Labor Day in 2014, I was marching in the streets of Jakarta with Nike factory workers. And after that, I was picked up by immigration police, was arrested, detained for 2 days, questioned, deported, and banned from the country. So that ban has since been lifted, and I'd like to get back to Indonesia. But that was really the genesis of my activism, and looking through the lens of the Nike sweatshop issue and deconstructing the globalization of capitalism and corporate power and oligarchy. You know, these terms are thrown out now and a lot of people understand what they mean, but you go back to 1997 through the early aughts, this was not out there in the everyday lexicon of your average American who's pissed about what's going on in the world. You know, and thanks a lot to Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez being on that fighting oligarchy tour, kind of normalizing the language and raising people's consciousness about this stuff. And over, you know, a 30-year arc, for a 29-year arc from my grad school days until now, I got deeper and deeper into my analysis, which brought me deeper and deeper into action, and different opportunities presented themselves for me to walk my talk. So after I left St. John's University, I moved back down to the beach here in New Jersey, where I grew up. I grew up in Belmar, New Jersey, and I made a conscious choice to move to Asbury Park because, and I don't talk about this a lot, but what drove me as a Catholic theologian, I felt like if Jesus were around in Monmouth County in 2000, he'd probably be in Asbury. And I was there and I was living there. I started getting involved in the community. I had been a high school teacher as well. And I used to tell my students all the time, you need to be active civic participants. And one of the easiest ways you can do that is go to your local town council meeting or local school board meeting. And I started to do that. I started going to council meetings and school board meetings, and I could not believe who was representing the people of Asbury Park and the injustices that I was seeing and the lack of vision and accountability for a city that had, 30% of the people living below the poverty line, 20% just above it. Half the kids weren't graduating from the high school. We had gangs, we had guns, we had outside developers coming in, gentrifying the city. And there just wasn't a really strong voice for the everyday people in Asbury, especially the poor, the marginalized, the oppressed. And as I started going to council meetings and started to get more critical and started to use the voice that I had people saying to me, you got to run, you got to run, you got to run. So I ran. That first council race was in 2004. I was elected in 2005 and proudly served as a member of the city council in Asbury. And while I was on the council, served as the co-chair of the subcommittee on affordable housing, co-chair on, it was called Asbury Works, which was a job program, was the founding chairperson of the subcommittee on homelessness, was the only council person to fight to get the Market Street mission, Jersey Shore Rescue Mission opened in the city of Asbury Park. All of my colleagues fought against that. And that I'm really proud of that because that has helped people for decades now. I was a co-chair of the Springwood Avenue subcommittee to help redevelop the southwest quadrant of town, and was involved. Even though I'm a former D1 athlete, coach, was a pro athlete as well. There was some pettiness involved where they wouldn't put me on the recreation committee. So I did my best just to influence and engage with my colleagues who are on that, and help to start the rec basketball league in town. So and in Asbury, I always tell people, it is such a microcosm of everything that is happening politically in the United States. You can find in this 1.4 square mile city on the sea in Monmouth County. And my belief at the time, and I still believe this, if you can create solutions for the problems that are faced by everyday citizens in a place like Asbury Park, you now had models that could be scaled and replicated. And that could go out well beyond Asbury, well beyond the state of New Jersey. And then I took a break from politics when my daughter was born. And when I got back into politics, I moved out of Asbury to be a dad I'm still a totally committed dad, but my daughter's mom was living outside of Asbury. So I went to go be a dad and try to make that work with her mom. And we still beautifully co-parent after 17 years, but we weren't meant to be a couple. So I moved back to Asbury, and I pulled my truck up in front of my apartment. I grabbed one box and I turned to walk in the door, and there's a guy standing on the sidewalk, a former constituent who, we both knew each other. And he's like, "Are you running? We need you." So I got pulled back into politics in Asbury in the 2013 race, and it was a really hotly contested race. I was running on a majority minority ticket. Had our ticket won, it would have been the first majority minority city council in the history of the city. And we got 300 ballots got challenged and sequestered in the court. And had those ballots gotten opened, and I believe 300 people were horribly disenfranchised. Had those ballots gotten opened, we would have won. And we would have been able to really enact, the agenda that I was trying to push when I was on there as the loyal opposition, 1 against 4. Now we would have had a council majority that would have been able to do some really exciting stuff. I took a break from politics after that. I was still involved in activism, but in terms of electoral politics, took a break. And then Hurricane Sandy hit, and it hit my hometown of Belmar. I'm actually living right now next to the house that I grew up in. My mom is right next door. And luckily for my mom and dad, the water stopped 4 houses to the east and on the fence line in the backyard. But everything that was east and south of that, it was a Hurricane Armageddon. And I, for almost a month, was helping to clean up and clear out people's homes here in Belmar, to the point where the town council gave me one of the giant dump trucks that you see going around, a town dump truck. And I was loading up crews of volunteers that were coming in every day to help the people of Belmar, and had the list. I would get the list every morning down at town hall. This person needs a refrigerator removed from their basement. Another one needs all the drywall taken down, whatever they needed. We were just getting people in, cleaned up, cleared out, got the town stabilized. And then I went back to working under the assumption that Governor Christie was going to live up to his word when he was on national television and having his kumbaya moment with President Obama, holding hands, walking down the beach and saying, getting Sandy families back home will be the top priority of my administration. Fast forward almost 2 years later, and I'm at the climate crisis march in New York City. 100,000 people. I was supposed to go with a friend of mine. She bailed out last minute. I said, I'm still going. 100,000 people. I'm marching through the streets of Manhattan. I end up next to 6 people from Ocean County, New Jersey, who live within 15 minutes of the tavern that my family has owned for the last 44 years. And none of them were back home yet. And I could not believe the stories they were telling me. There was a woman there, Amanda, who I've been friends with ever since that day, who had a lot of experience as a community organizer and activist in New York City and Washington, D.C. And she's like, look, this is a massive issue. She was originally from and now lives in Beach Haven West, which was hit really bad by Hurricane Sandy. So she was just starting to organize her neighbors. And she said, we've got to do something. So I had her meet me at the family tavern. We sat in a booth and came up with a plan to try and re-engage the governor. And we were just looking for a moment to put the Sandy families back on the map. And a few days after that, there was an announcement that he was going to have a press conference in my hometown of Belmar on Main Street and 9th Avenue, talking about what a great job he's done getting Sandy families back home. So we decided we're going to do a silent protest. We made posters up. This was no radical action. This was just, we're going to hold posters up. My poster said, stay in New Jersey and finish the job, get Sandy families back home. I had on a 3-piece suit. I've got this package that I was born into. When I'm dressed like that, I look like a Secret Service agent. So I was able to go right up to the second row, and I sat down in the empty chair next to his entire cabinet. And nobody said a word. And I've got my backpack and my folded up poster in it. And I'm just sitting there. And then I heard rumblings in the back. So Amanda and another activist had already stood up and were holding their posters. And then I stood up, and I'm 6'4", and I'm holding a poster. It's like a billboard right in his sight line. And I had planned on being silent. And then he engaged me. And then he started saying things that were wildly untrue about me. And I mean, how would he know, saying that I needed to roll my sleeves up? Like, dude, I was covered in sandy slop, head to toe, crawling through people's basements and crawl spaces. And you're going to tell me to roll my sleeves up and do the work? And then he had his famous or infamous moment where he told me to sit down and shut up. And I certainly did not. And that bullying routine, he was used to that working, but it wasn't working on me. 1, because of my size. 2, because I used to be a councilman in Asbury Park. You want to deal with tough audiences? Go to the public comment period during an Asbury Park City Council meeting. So this was not my first rodeo. After that sit down, shut up moment, what a lot of people don't know, because of the media pressure, I was 48 hours nonstop going to different interviews up in New York or doing things like this or I'm on the radio doing phone calls. And because of the pressure that was placed on the Christie regime, in the next 3 months, more money went out the door to help Hurricane Sandy families, the money that they had been earmarked that they deserved, that went out in the next 3 months that had gone out in the previous 2 years combined. Right. So that's what grassroots activism and civil disobedience, while yes, it allows us to express ourselves and our anger toward our elected officials, it can and it should and can be extremely effective in changing policy and getting results for citizens. So from that, I was a political independent. I still consider myself politically independent. The Democratic Party approached me. The mayor of Belmar at the time, Matt Doherty, who's a friend of mine, reached out and said that the county party was interested in having me run for state assembly. And that was in the 2015 cycle. I told them, look, I'll run, but I am going to be an independent Democrat. I am not bought. I am not bossed. I will hire my own people. I will have my own messaging. I'll run under your banner, but no one's controlling me. And I ran. It was in the 30th district, state legislative district. And had we won, at the time, Christie was just vetoing all kinds of great policies the Democrats are trying to pass. Had we won those 2 seats in the 30th, we would have created a veto-proof majority in the assembly. And I was so frustrated with the Democratic Party at that time because this was what's considered an off year in state politics. There was no governor at the top of the table. There was no state senator at the top. It was the state assembly. So it's considered that off year. Nobody's paying attention. Voter participation is usually around 19 to 23%. And my feeling was, with the grassroots energy that we had and with this sit down and shut up moment, everybody in the state knew who I was at that point, right? Like I would walk into bars and people like, hey, just sit down and shut up guy. And, I would engage and talk to them, try to do some organizing. And I was saying to the party leadership, I need a $60,000 investment on top of what I've raised already to do, at the time, mailings were a lot more important. I said to do a 4-layered mailing campaign where they'll get introduced to the sit down and shut up guy. And then here's the policies. And then we got to get out the vote. And I felt we could have stolen those 2 seats. And that's a minimal investment for a state assembly race. Other state assembly races cost millions. And I was asking for $60,000. They didn't give it to me. I was really clear how I felt about that after the fact. I held no punches. So that did not ingratiate me to the leadership within the local Democratic Party or around the state. 2016, I got a phone call from a guy who was a guy that I went to college with, who had worked on my 2015 assembly race. He was a DC operative, campaign guy. And he said, what are you doing? You running for anything? I said, no, I'm taking a break. I was actually outside playing with my daughter when he called me. And I said, I'm enjoying this break and family time. And he said, well, let me call you back. And he called me back not too soon after that. And then I was getting an invitation to run in the 3rd district where I don't live. The 3rd district used to have my family's tavern in it. We're now on the 2nd for the business. And I was asked by the DCCC to jump into the race in the 3rd district. And there was already a candidate in. They had what was called the county line in the Burlington County Committee. I ended up getting the county line in Ocean County. And at that time, if you didn't have the county line, you weren't winning, right? The county line is how our ballots were structured. So you had, it would be all of the candidates that the Democratic Party chose would be in this one column. Then you'd be off here if you weren't chosen out in what we call ballot Siberia. And it was worth 35 points at the outset. The political scientists from Rutgers have shared. So I learned a lot through that race. Didn't win because I wasn't on the line out in Burlington, which was the lead county. 2018, ran again in the 4th district where I grew up, where I went to school, where I taught at one of the high schools here, where I had coached kids in almost every town in this district. And my belief at that time was there was a lot of political energy that got created by Trump 1.0. And my feeling was that if we could marry this grassroots, a real populist, progressive grassroots message, a la Senator Sanders, and marry that with the institutional Democratic Party, there might be a chance to take out Chris Smith and get that win. And, another guy jumped into the primary, and I know the Democrats were happy with that because they now had somebody that they could back. Because of how critical I was of them in 2015, they were exceptionally happy with this. So there, I could walk. It would take us too much time. Needless to say, and I don't think this will surprise people, there was a fair amount of corruption that went on, and this guy ended up getting the county line in all 3 counties. And even up against the entire machine and the county line, we still got 43% of the vote. And I know if I were doing that race all over again, even with the same dynamics, I know we could win that. Because doing the analysis, I know the mistakes that I made and that our campaign made, and it could have easily been adjusted. And so that was 2018, and I got to see inside the belly of the beast within the Democratic Party, being both someone that was invited by invited by the state party to run for state assembly, then invited by the national party to run in the 3rd district, and then doing like an independent grassroots insurgent campaign in 2018. And it was an incredible political education. Continue to do all kinds of activism in the midst of all of that. And, have since those times have been engaged in, actually in the midst of that, I went over to Lesbos, Greece, on the front lines of the Syrian refugee crisis in the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. I did deployments down to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria hit down there, and down to the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian hit down there. And have just had, a lot of interesting activist experience, continue to be engaged on the Nike sweatshop issue. I just did a lecture for a couple of classes out in Long Island the other day, and the students were incredible. Just got asked to do another talk on that on Monday at my alma mater, the high school where I went to here in Monmouth County. So I'm excited for that. And, all of these experiences are what I bring to bear when I'm offering critical analysis of somebody like Cory Booker, right? So my feeling is, as I shared with you in the Instagram post that I had put up and I had sent to you, that Cory Booker is just missing the moment that we are in.
Yeah.
He is playing. I know the playbook, having been a candidate. The landscape is completely different. Cory is running. One, he should be fulfilling his obligations as our senior senator here from the state of New Jersey. What he is doing right now is laying the groundwork for a presidential run in 2028. I mean, it's obvious to anybody that knows how this game is played, and he's doing it with the same playbook, as if we don't have a fascist in the White House and an entire fascist regime that is alarmingly consolidating power, right, and is just stripping away rights that should be enshrined via our Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? He's not recognizing the fact that the Trump fascist regime is a fascist regime. I have not heard him say that. I could be wrong, and I am open to somebody saying, no, Jim, here's where Cory called Donald Trump a fascist. I have never heard him say that. 2, we've got a police force, a private military force under ICE that is not loyal to the Constitution, that is not loyal to the citizens of the United States, but has been designed to be loyal to Trump and his fascist regime. And we've got Cory Booker, along with Jeffries and Schumer and so many other Democrats that are down on Capitol Hill, saying that ICE just needs to be reformed. Well, we're not going to give them any funding until they're willing to do this. Cory's talking about body cameras, and no, 2 words: abolish ICE. Full stop. The country was able to operate for 225 years without ICE being around, right? Immigration issues can be dealt with without ICE. They are now a private army of Donald Trump. They need to be abolished. And any Democrat, most especially our senior senator from New Jersey, who is not willing to say that, for me, it's disqualifying, because they're not recognizing what we are dealing with and how they need to be an actual fighting opposition and not just an opposition in name only. And one of the other big issues that you mentioned when you started our conversation is with the regard to the genocide in Gaza. All right, we have a genocide. There is no ceasefire. Gazans are continuing to be slaughtered on a daily basis by the IDF. Every human rights organization in the world has called this a genocide, right? And Cory Booker lacks the political courage because He is in the back pocket of AIPAC, right? And they are pulling the puppet strings with him on this issue. Over the last 2 years, I have been in Cory Booker's office on multiple occasions with delegations from New Jersey Peace Action, delegations from New Jersey CARE, which is the lead Muslim organization in the state, delegation from Doctors Against Genocide, and on every occasion, do you know who refused to sit in the room and meet with us?
Cory Booker.
Cory Booker.
Yeah.
Right? I guarantee you, if we were to get his calendar, if his scheduler were allow, and I feel like it's not a law, it should be. The schedules of our congresspersons and our senators should be public information. We should know who our employee, because that's what he is. He's our employee as the people. We should know who he is meeting with from the moment he starts his day to the moment he ends his day professionally. And I would bet the ranch that if we had that information, I bet Cory met with his AIPAC handler on multiple occasions over the last 2 years.
Let me see. I have the figure right here in all of the notes. I think it was he raised around $30 million this election cycle.
30 would, I think that may be high, and it may not be. The last time I checked, he was at his war chest had about $20 million in it, 10 million of which came in the immediate aftermath of his 25-hour stunt, where it wasn't a filibuster. It wasn't filibustering anything. And I will say, as someone who's done public speaking professionally for almost 30 years now, it is a feat in itself to stand for 25 hours and speak. So I will give him credit for that. Now, I would give him more credit if he said, hey, in the week following me doing that action, $10 million came into my campaign coffers, and I am going to use that $10 million right now to help build a grassroots or reinforce a grassroots infrastructure here in the state of New Jersey to be prepared as these ICE surges. We're seeing them happen. I'm watching your posts regularly and others
every day.
Right, where ICE is here, ICE is here, ICE is here. Well, Cory Booker should be using that $10 million that he raised from that 25-hour speech. And as an example, you've got Casa Freehold here in Monmouth County that I serve as an advisor to and I volunteer with. They're the lead immigrant rights center for Monmouth County. Cory Booker should be giving $250,000 to Casa Freehold and saying, we want organizers on the ground. We want to expand your rapid response teams. And he should be doing that in every county around the state. And he should also be here meeting with those people, right? It's one thing if you and I said, hey, we want to put an organizing meeting together and try to get all like-minded people in one room and come up with a comprehensive plan on how we're going to push back against this onslaught of fascism, and the spear of that is ICE coming into our towns all over the state. Yeah, we could do that, and we may get cooperation. It's a whole different ballgame when you're the senior senator who has national brand name cachet to call for those meetings and say, I'm having meetings in every county around the state. And I want all of I'm telling my staff, I want you to log every grassroots group that we could bring in as a stakeholder on this. We need to build a nonviolent army that is going to push back with massive pressure in the same way that the people in Minneapolis have done. And I'm not saying that we can't do this as grassroots citizens and activists. My frustration is when you've got a bully pulpit like Cory Booker and you've got tens of millions of dollars in your campaign coffers, you should be utilizing that bully pulpit to do the grassroots organizing, and you should be funding the grassroots organizing to defend our state and not be out of state on a book tour chasing presidential aspirations that you have that are 2 years out from now, right? We're in a 5-alarm fire for our republic, and you are chasing a selfish political dream at the cost of the citizens of our state.
Yeah, I mean, we've had an ICE shooting already in New Jersey, and after what happened in Minneapolis and my history working on the uncommitted campaign for New Jersey, being up till 3 a.m. at the state capitol counting ballots, and his issues that he stated during, I mean, right here, he voted to block arms deals to Israel. And I mean, we're literally seeing that his constituents and
Did you say he voted to block arms deals, or he voted to support the arms deals?
sorry, he voted to support it.
Yeah. Yep.
And
yep.
and it's the social services he's withholding, and like contingency funds. He's led town halls to bypass the federal blocks, and he's positioning himself as a defender of the state's most vulnerable, but he doesn't even answer his constituents. He's not here. He's always somewhere else. I mean, he could be here talking to his community groups, and the last time he's done something like that, it hasn't happened. He's all the way off doing his book deal. And it's like, we have ICE here right now. We had a shooting. We have people being arrested. Just yesterday, we had the Ledgewood protest, and I recorded a podcast episode with a first-time protester today, and over 300 people showed up to the protest. And it's like, all of our local politicians are saying something, but where's people in DC? Like, they're not here. And right now we're under a siege of ICE in this state. And we're seeing more and more, and detention centers being proposed. I mean, he didn't even really take a stance on Delaney Hall. It was more neutral. And I mean, we're seeing what's happening at Delaney Hall. Just a few weeks ago, someone died in the custody of Delaney Hall. And I want to know what's going on, because this is primary season. And I mean, how do we fight this as a community and get someone in office that represents us? Because I'm tired of this. So many people are tired of this. We want change, and our politicians just aren't hearing us. They're representing the status quo. I mean, liberalism is for a lot of people, but it doesn't work when you need to be radical. I mean, we have a Gestapo type police force rounding up people, citizens, using facial recognition scans and performing traffic stops, and just bypassing every constitutional right that the Supreme Court has ruled. Non-citizens have rights, and the due process is just not there. And we have politicians like Chuck Schumer that is talking about struggling financial needs. And yeah, families all across the country are struggling with financial needs. But at the same point in time, like New Jersey and other states have large populations of non-citizens. And where is the action other than blocking and shutting down the government temporarily with these departments and saying there needs to be body cameras? But we've seen with police brutality, you can just shut off a body camera. There's no accountability. It's so what do we even do as community activists, and like me reporting on independent journalism and like reaching out for these comments about politicians and just going unnoticed, and them not being accountable to their constituents?
Yeah. So when I've done workshops on this kind of stuff, or even when I was running for office and held office, I used to tell people there are three things that all of us can do: organize, organize, and organize. Right? And in a new workshop that I've put together, you mentioned in the intro, I've been working with a group since April called the Refuse Fascism Movement. I'm on the national organizing team for that. And I put together a new grassroots workshop. And one of the things that part of that workshop is people that are new to this, who are outraged but have never done anything like this before. A really simple thing that I'm encouraging people to do is to go old school, right? Get out some paper and a pen, go into your phone and write down 10 people's names that are geographically close to you, that share your idea and your ideals.
Yeah, power mapping.
Yeah, so get for the younger people out there, right, who are Stranger Things fans, this is getting your party together, right? So you're going to get your party of 10 together, and then you're going to put their phone numbers. Now, I learned something. I've got a friend who is a 35-year-old librarian who lives in Asbury Park, and she's asked for help and some organizing stuff. And I told her to do this exercise, and she sent me a message back saying, basically, I'm 54. She's like, Jim, essentially saying, I don't want to make you feel old, but I don't have these people's phone numbers. We communicate on
Instagram handles and
Instagram or whatever, Snapchat maybe for the younger people, but Instagram primarily. So I've added a piece to that grassroots workshop that I put together where there's a script that goes along after you make your list, an intermediary step for anybody that's 35 and under. You're going to send a message on Instagram. I might say, hey, Penelope, I know this is going to sound like real Gen X and give off Stranger Things vibes, but I need you to send me your phone number, and I'm going to call you to talk about something, right? And in the slide that I have for this part of the workshop, I've got Nancy from Stranger Things on an old school payphone. And this is the kind of organizing that we need to do, right? It isn't, because I can tell you far too much energy and expectation is being placed by particularly younger activists and even older ones on social media and digital organizing. That should be an amplifier of messaging. It's not real organizing. And I'll give you a great example. So when Rob Reiner and his wife were horrifically murdered, and Trump said the horrible things that he said, with the Refuse Fascism movement, we organized a demonstration, a candlelight vigil outside of Trump Tower, maybe 2 days after the Reiners had been killed. And I put it out on social media, and I put it in a number of different groups in the New York, New Jersey area. I've posted a lot of stuff online since I got online 17 years ago on social media sites. This was one of the most commented on and most shared posts that I'd ever put up. And it was an invitation, like, get to Trump Tower at, I think it was a 7:00 event that we were doing, whatever night of the week it was. And my thought was, man, we're going to have a few hundred people there because of the online engagement with it. We had maybe 30. Not that that's a bad action, right? But it was another reminder to me, we are not going to get this done online. We need to be doing old school organizing. And I do think people like myself who have decades of experience in this, we have a responsibility to be teaching younger activists and then to learn from younger activists like, hey, we're doing this in-person stuff and using the old school tools. And then here's how we amplify it utilizing the new school tools. But we've really got to get back to that grassroots organizing. So, the question that you're asking, like, what do we do? How do we fight back against this? There is no it's not rocket science, but there is an organizing science to it. And that first step is get that piece of paper out, make your list of 10 people, right? People can if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on social media, on Instagram at JW Keady, on Facebook /Jim Keady. You can send me an email, jwkeady@gmail.com, and I can send you the scripts to use to create your party of 10. And it may be that it's just, hey, we're all going to meet at a coffee shop or we're going to meet at the library. And the first meeting may just be, let's just talk about how we're feeling and kind of reconnect in a very human way in person. And then from that, you start to build out. How are we going to respond? If ICE comes to our community, do we have a group that's ready with whistles to go out? If ICE comes to our community and people who are afraid to leave their homes, do we have a mutual aid network where we can start delivering food, right? How would that mutual aid network be structured? And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are groups that are doing this kind of stuff in the state of New Jersey when things are quote unquote normal, right? In terms of delivering
on wheels.
Yeah. Or like a Casa Freehold. There's a food pantry there, and there's all kinds of distribution that happens out of there. And there's organizations doing that stuff all over the state. So, kind of taking what's already happening and readjusting it to the moment in which we find ourselves. And again, would it be awesome if Cory Booker represented us and said, like I talked about a little while ago, I'm going to have a meeting in every county, and I'll try to do it at the micro level in as many towns as I can to pull leaders together. Imagine if Cory Booker said, I want every elected Democrat in the state of New Jersey at a meeting at Rutgers University on this date and this time. And we're going to put together our plan to support the governor with our federal resources. So we've got the governor with the state resources. We've got the federal resources. We've got local level, school boards, city councils, county level, anywhere that there's a Democrat or a left-leaning independent that is in an office, we're getting together and we're putting a plan together. That's leadership, not I'm going on a book tour. Join me at one of these places so you can hear about it, because I'm in the mindset that I'm running for president in 2028 against somebody like Mitt Romney. No, we are up against fascists, and they will not concede power simply through an election. That's the other thing. We're hoping that there's going to be free and fair elections come 2028, let alone 2026. There's the possibility that we may not have free and fair elections. And again, our senior senator with the bully pulpit and the financial resources and everything that comes along with holding one of the most, the 150, 160 most powerful offices in the United States of America. And he is playing Pollyanna. It's, it's incredible. I feel your frustration.
Yeah, and I've been a community organizer. I started out with Union County Mutual Aid, organizing events like giving Wi-Fi in public parks, handing out water during the summer, and providing rides and pharmacy pickups. And mutual aid is what's going to get us through this right now. We need networks in our community that can respond very quickly, like the rapid response networks that are all across the state, COSECHA, New Labor. I'm a DSA member.
I was just going to say DSA would be another one to throw in there. So look, as we're having this conversation, one of the things that we can get caught up in is, wow, we'd really love Cory Booker to do this. Well, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them, right? So we know he's not necessarily going to do this. So we need to do this work. And I think what I would encourage people to do is to start as local as you can and then build out, right? And create models. Like we're seeing models, like up in Roxbury, we're seeing models for how to push back against a potential ICE detention center. With the rapid response teams around the state. There, when you look at the map and they have the numbers to call, okay, I think there's 4, maybe 5 hotlines that are on that state map for the rapid response teams.
Yeah.
We need 21 of those, right? If not more. We need them to be as local as possible with as many possible resources as possible. And we as everyday citizens, so one of the things, I was listening to a historian yesterday. He was, I'm drawing a blank on his name. He used to be at Yale. I forget what university he's at now. This guy, it's almost as if his life as a historian was built for this moment to offer analysis of like what's going on, right? And whether it's him or there was another historian I was listening to early last week, one of the things that comes up if you study the rise of authoritarian regimes, and people look back and they go, oh God, how did that happen? And you go through not just the academic literature, but you really dig deep into the granular level. And you're reading what interviews or, whether it's a sociologist doing an interview with people after the fact or interviews that were done in different publications. There was a sentence that came up with multiple people in multiple countries in multiple authoritarian settings. I thought someone would fix it. And that means someone else.
It's the first they come for poem.
Of course. First they came for the communists, and I was not a communist. so I did not speak up. And then they came for the socialists, and I was not a socialist, so I did not speak up. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I was not a trade unionist, so I did not speak up. And then they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I did not speak up. And then Pastor Niemöller had the revelation that, and then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. All right? Now, to not counter, but to offer a hopeful idea, one of my favorite poems, they drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in. The idea of, yes, we want our elected officials and the Democratic establishment to be as committed and radical in their politics as we are, and doing organizing and using all of those resources that they've got, and recognize they're not. So we do it, and we build this circle that takes them in, and eventually they will respond. Now, when they do, and some already are, right? Some definitely already are. Even within our New Jersey congressional delegation, there are some people that are doing some of the work that we would want them to do on these fronts. If and when others come around, yeah, we've got to kind of bite our tongues and say welcome, as opposed to, you know, it took you effing long enough. And there was a lot of damage done while we had to wage the fight to make it politically expedient and safe for you to now do what's possible. So I share your desire to have. And when I ran for office, when I ran for Congress, when I was out on the stump, I would tell people, look, on the issues that now seem trite, that because we're dealing with fascism now, but like universal single-payer healthcare, Medicare for all, don't need to convince me. I'm going in day one to fight for it. Green New Deal, don't need to convince me. Going in to fight for it. Right? Campaign finance reform, overturn Citizens United, don't need to convince me. Going in to fight for it. And on these issues, right, if I were running now, yeah, pushing back again, calling Trump a fascist and defining his regime as fascist, don't need to convince me. I'm on the front lines of the Diffuse Fascism movement. Genocide in Gaza? Absolutely. No weapons and funding to Israel? Absolutely. Don't need to convince me. Right? And this is what ICE, abolish ICE, full stop. And this is what people, I feel, are at the grassroots are hungering for, not just here in the state of New Jersey, but all over the United States. And we're seeing people that are utilizing that messaging, like Analia Mejia in her race. She won with that messaging. I don't know if you caught the Princeton Democratic Organization did a candidate forum the other night, and the issue of Gaza came up. And man, the people in that audience let the candidates know where they stood. And those individuals that were defending Israel's genocide in Gaza right now, it did not go well for them out in Princeton.
Yeah.
Right. And that sentiment, I think, is prevalent. And my feeling is we should be looking for and supporting candidates who aren't taking that position now because there's political expedience to it, and it might help you to win a primary. We should be looking for people who were, when it was wildly unpopular and we were called anti-Semites, people who were out at the encampments, right? Like you have people who will still badmouth the kids, the young adults who were out on our college campuses, whether it was Rutgers or Princeton, Rutgers, Newark, right? I was at those encampments.
I was at Newark too.
Those are whip smart young adults who knew the issues inside and out, right? And the Democratic Party fought harder against them than they have been fighting against the Trump fascist regime.
Yeah.
So I share your frustration with that reality.
Yeah, and the confusion, was it Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, Donald Trump saying radical left scum and destroying the country. And meanwhile, he's dismantling every constitutional right. And just snatching people from their homes. Like, when was it okay, for ICE, that's not a police force, to just break into people's homes with AR-15s and rifles and tear gas homes. And I mean, what happened in Minneapolis with the 6-month-old baby that stopped breathing? And at the time there was a shooting, and it was like, I wish I could say what I really want to say, but I know this is going to go.
This. What holds you back from saying it?
Government watch list and being thrown in a jail cell.
Safe, smart.
But there are channels on Signal where I've said some things and I'm like, okay, not my best moments, like, but justified with being angry. And I mean, everyone should go to therapy. I was talking to my therapist last night just about everything going on, and him acknowledging that it's just like a fascist environment. And like, when are they going to, like, right now it's immigrants and non-citizens. What's next?
Yeah, if we come back, Penelope, to the Niemöller poem, right, where I like to say history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure rhymes at times. And with the Niemöller poem, like, first they came for the communists. First they came for the student activists that were trying to stop a genocide. Then they came for the immigrants. Then I think the next group will be people like us. Right? And then, as the poem goes, yeah, it doesn't end well, right? And it took a world war to stop the last major rise of fascism. And what's unfortunate in terms of how we're educated here in the United States is we learn a lot about World War II between 41 and 45, right? So the 40s.
We don't see the 30s.
We don't learn nearly enough about the 30s. So, in April of last year, I took my mom and my daughter to Germany. It was on my mom's bucket list. And my mother, like me, is a history buff, World War II stuff, and she wanted to visit Dachau. Now, for people who don't know what Dachau is or was, Dachau was the first, what became a concentration camp. It wasn't initially. It was a camp for political dissidents, right? So 3 weeks after Hitler gets named Chancellor of the Reich, they establish Dachau and start rounding up anybody that was critical of them. And it was in Dachau, as the Reich progressed, it became the prototype for all concentration camps. It's where they tested out, where they did horrific medical experimentation, where they built the first gas chambers, where they tested out different kinds of torture to extract information from people. And that model then got deployed throughout the Reich and the concentration camps at, like Auschwitz is an example that people are way more familiar with. But when you go, and this is my second time that I was in Dachau. I was there when I was a 22-year-old. I backpacked around the world, and I went to Dachau back then, and it had an impact, absolutely. Fast forward, as a then 53-year-old last year, the education program is incredibly powerful. And we were lucky in that our guide, and they go through a lot of training to become a guide at Dachau. And our particular guide happened to be an American who used to teach history here in the United States, is now living in Germany, married to a German. And so there was no language barrier, nothing lost in translation. And as we're walking through the different parts of the camp, and it's, again, this is the 30s part of the Reich, he would make a point to say, does this sound familiar for the Americans who are here with us? Does this sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? And he recommended to me, and we had a great conversation, a number of them throughout the day. And I said, look, if there's one book that I should pick up, what should it be? He said, go to the bookstore here and get The Coming of the Third Reich by Evans, Richard Evans, I think it is, Evans. So I recommend that to everyone who is watching here. If you want to understand that 30s piece of, because people will say, how can you compare Trump to Hitler? I mean, what's his name? The British talk show host. I'm drawing a blank. You would know who it is if I said it. I just watched a clip of him saying, "How can you compare Trump to Hitler? Hitler murdered 6 million people, blah, blah, blah." Well,
That's where we're going. It's the early stages.
That's 1940s Hitler. We're comparing Trump and his regime to 1930s Hitler and the Reich. And, the SA and the SS and what we're seeing with ICE. It's just, you go through a list, and this is what we talk about in the Refuse Fascism movement. And I want to encourage everybody to check that out. It's refusefascism.org. You just kind of go through this checklist of what Trump has done and is continuing to do. And he just keeps alarmingly checking off more and more boxes. So what we say in the Refuse Fascism movement is, in the name of humanity, we cannot accept a fascist America. And therefore, the entire Trump fascist regime must go now. Right? And that we are trying to pull together a broad coalition of people. What we think makes our campaign and the analysis and the praxis unique is we've got the demand. Trump must go now. And then actions flow from that. And that's what, coming back to the core of our conversation about Senator Booker, I want to hear that language coming from Senator Booker, coming from Senator Kim, coming from every congressperson. Trump must go now. And then we figure out all the different levers that can be pulled to make that happen. And sometimes, I've been on massive national organizing calls with Refuse Fascism. People say, well, what is it exactly? What's your plan exactly? The demand has been made. And I happened to I was at home one night, and I've got a Jenga set in the kitchen, and it happened to be sitting on the table, and I just pulled it out and I stacked the Jenga set up. And I just started pulling blocks out. I said, this may be a demonstration, coming back to today, or fast forwarding rather, this might be the demonstration we did yesterday outside Trump Tower. This might be Minneapolis and the stand people are taking there. This might be 10 Republicans on the Hill find their backbone and join Democrats to file articles of impeachment. This may be and eventually one of those blocks getting pulled is going to topple the whole regime, right? But the first thing we need is that shared vision, focus, and demand. Trump must go now, right? And I believe if we have that and we start to marshal all of the human and activist resources and energy toward that goal, that we still have a window of time to drive this regime from power before they fully consolidate under fascist authoritarianism. And then, then we make decisions. Are we staying here? Right? And there are a lot of people that won't have the resources to go anywhere. And then there is no living freely for anyone under a fascist regime, because on any given day, you may be the target, just like we're seeing immigrants be the targets right now. Or we saw the students standing up for Gaza being the targets before. And the next targets may be, again, activists like us. But nobody is safe under fascism. No one. And this is the kind these are the kinds of alarm bells that I want to be hearing. I don't want to hear, I know we have to present a positive vision as well to get votes. So let me say this. We don't have to live like this. Right? We don't have to live like this. We don't have to have, I believe we can have elected officials who don't take any PAC money, especially PAC money from a foreign entity that's committing genocide. Right? We don't have to live under fascism. We don't need to have Gestapo-like forces. And in order to do these things, we need elected officials working in collaboration with a grassroots army of Americans who want to see a better country, right? But have the guts to fight right now for it. Not just give speeches, to be in the streets with people, to utilize every resource that they have, and they can get access to help people to push back against this, right? We can have a country. Look, if we can be paying ICE agents massive sign-on bonuses and, six-figure salaries, I think we can afford Medicare for all. if we can be putting this much money into ICE, this private military loyal only to a fascist leader, yeah, I think we can be paying our teachers a little bit more, right? I think that we could maybe make state schools, from whether it's a trade school, community college, or a four-year university, tuition free. Clearly the money's there, right? When it's a political priority, somehow they found the money, right? So yes, we can have all of these amazing things, and we need people that will put those plans in place. Before we are able to do any of that, we got to drive a fascist regime from power. That's the reality.
I mean, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Homan, these people need to go. I'm tired of this shit. I'm sorry to curse. I at this point, like, following in the footsteps of Marsha P. Johnson, I'm just gonna start losing my shit and throwing stuff because, I mean, this is not a time to be peaceful. Like, we have tried that. We need to take direct action. I mean, just a few days ago, and government, if you're watching this, I call for peaceful protests. I think we should have just protest signs, but at the same point in time, we had the governor of Minnesota send the National Guard to hand out donuts and coffee. Meanwhile, people were being gunned down in the street, and we're making peace treaties with ICE to be better police officers, and they're not legitimate. They can't do traffic stops, but they do. And they just, sorry, I'm so angry about this whole thing.
Look, so yesterday I was one of the organizers working with the Refuse Fascism New York City chapter, and they invited me to come up to the event that they had outside of Trump Tower. And there's the Refuse Fascism group did a 12 o'clock event, and then Rise and Resist did a 1 o'clock. And that was the one that kind of went all over social media. People were flipping off Trump, giving him the bird at 1 o'clock on multiple occasions over an hour period of time. And I was standing with a couple of marshals by the entry. They had, gates set up. The police set gates up. And this guy stops, and my specialty, middle-aged white male, right? So these are people that I thoroughly enjoy engaging because I just make their gears grind up because I don't fit what they perceive to be as an activist. And he was upset. I actually pivoted him away from another activist, and so it kind of stood in that breach. And I said, I got this guy. And he was pissed because there are kids walking past here and people are screaming, F you. And I said, dude, I understand maybe as a dad, your frustration and anger at hearing that word. I'm more upset that it seems like you're not pissed off enough that we have pedophiles raping children that hold some of the most powerful
38,000 times.
Right?
Donald Trump, 38,000 times.
Yeah. So why don't you focus on that and focus a little bit less on, a curse word being said in the streets of New York City? Right. And I engage him on a couple of other issues, but that's, that's another one, right? Like I've written about this publicly. I was sexually assaulted as a boy, and it messes you up. And, I'm most certain that there are, I see it. You see what people are posting about, how they're reliving their traumas, and looking at this and going, like, a kid who gets picked up, shoplifting at Walmart meets swifter justice more quickly than people who trafficked children for sex. Right? And it really shows, sadly, where we are at right now, and what we are dealing with. Yeah, and I like you. If people they're holding office and they are duly elected leaders in our representative democracy, many of them are failing the moment. and the test that has been laid before them, because we need action. We need a lot more action and a lot less rhetoric.
I think that is a great place to finish off. It's powerful. I mean, we need to primary every one of these politicians that are just not here for us. And I mean, if we're not out in the streets protesting and screaming, we're not doing our civic duties as residents and citizens. We can't let fascism win. There is no future under fascism, and everyone needs to be in the streets. Everyone needs to be organizing their communities. Everyone needs to be going to news sources that are on the ground. Everyone needs to stop consuming this whitewashed history of the United States. I mean, we have been built on genocide since the beginning. We have been built on the oppressive forces of the Black and Brown community. We've seen Jim Crow. We've seen everything from the villainization of queer people in the 80s, and now Islamophobia after 9/11, and now we're just seeing a rise on every demographic being targeted, and most of the people are just like, oh, it's fine, nothing's wrong. So I think we can all agree something is seriously fucking wrong, and we need to get out there and do something right now, because come 6 months from now, we may have a federalized election. We may have Donald Trump canceling. I mean, with the Insurrection Act, there's no way he can cancel the primaries. But I don't see a future where Donald Trump does not eradicate more constitutional rights to remain in power. I mean, he's already advertising Trump 2028. And I think that is the most ridiculous thing on the planet. I mean, we know it would take 10 years before a constitution is ratified by every state. And this constitution means nothing. The law of the land means nothing to this admin. And yeah, I can't have anything nice to say about Trump.
Yeah. And we also need to recognize that this stuff didn't happen in a vacuum, right? That there were systemic, like you went through some of the historical arc of the foundational injustices that, we have these birth defects that our country was born with, right? And then they manifest themselves in different ways till this historical moment that we find ourselves. And it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take sacrifice. And when I talk to people about this, when I do the Refuse Fascism workshop, I'll say, look, let's pretend, just hypothetically, that Adolf Hitler himself got reincarnated. And I'm not saying Trump is Adolf Hitler. We're going to the actual Adolf Hitler. We got some Hitler dust and poured some water on it. And there is Hitler 2.0, who is now in the White House. And we know that Hitler's going to do what Hitler's going to do. And we know that it's going to lead to a world war, and tens of millions of people will die in horrible deaths and all of the horrors that come with a world war, right? And we know that's the path that he will go on. If I said to you, I need you to take 3 weeks of your life and sacrifice everything, put it on hold, and we could stop Hitler before any of that begins to take root, would you do it? And every person in front of these audiences, of course, because they're looking at 1941 to 45 Hitler, and they know what's coming. Well, we're in the 1930s part. And we've been asking you to get out to demonstrations from the Refuse Fascism movement, whether it's in Washington, D.C., or New York City, or some of the other big cities. But for me, it's D.C., the seat of political power, New York, the seat of financial power. Right? And we've been inviting people, and the numbers are growing, but they're not growing fast enough. And it can't just be convenient demonstrations in your community on a given Saturday for 2 hours where you make cool posters. Right? Because we're either going to fight fascism and dislodge it non-violently through numbers, millions, 10 million people is what we will need in the streets consistently, day in and day out. We're either going to do that, or it's going to be like the 1944, and you're going to be in the Ardennes forest in the cold in the Battle of the Bulge, fighting fascists violently. All right? So which one do you want? And that's where we've each got to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what would we be willing to do? What would we be willing to sacrifice? We've seen two, high-profile cases, and it's because they're white that they're as high-profile, right? In Mr. Preddy and Ms. Good, that, got people going, whoa, things are real. Black and brown people have been telling us things have been real for a long time.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And, Muslim Americans have been telling us since 9/11, things are real. Yeah. And now, that comfortable majority is now starting to feel a bit of the discomfort. And the question is, do they want to lean into it and get very uncomfortable so that, as someone who's the father of a 17-year-old daughter, so that my daughter and all her friends and everybody that comes after that can live in a free, fair, democratic republic.
Yeah.
So look in that mirror, everybody. Ask those questions.
Absolutely.
Start making up your party of 10 list and get organizing. And if anyone watching this needs help, wants me to come to their town, their community, their group that's already working on this stuff, and I can share from my 30 years of activism things that I think will work in this moment. If I can help in any way, again, reach out to me on social media, Instagram, JWKEADY, on Facebook /Jim Keady, KEADY, or you can email me, jwkeady@gmail.com, and I will do everything I can to help you with your local organizing efforts.
Jim, thank you so much. Everyone watching, Penny pointed with the Penny Tribune. Respect independent journalism, seek out the truth, and get out in the goddamn streets and start making a sound and screaming. That's the only way we're going to get over this. And thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your insight. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. So for everyone watching.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And keep doing the important work that you're doing.